I'm Rachel Whitman, 36 years old, and the day my younger sister got married, my mother slapped me across the face in front of 200 guests. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just stood there, eyes fixed on hers, knowing something had shifted that couldn't be undone. She thought it was just another scolding. She didn't realize who had been standing a few feet away watching every moment unfold, someone who owed me a favor and who never forgot a debt. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever stood your ground when someone tried to take what you earned. I was born and raised in Tacoma, Washington. We didn't grow up poor, but we weren't the kind of family that had second homes or designer shoes either. My mother, Linda, worked in administration at a dental office, always polished, always concerned with appearances. My dad passed when I was 19, and from that point on, it was the three of us. Me, my mom, and my little sister, Jenna. I was the dependable one. The one who kept her head down, finished college early, and landed a job in commercial real estate before I was even 24. I saved, I invested, and I lived below my means for nearly a decade. While other people my age were getting drinks after work or flying to Vegas, I was figuring out loan terms and square footage requirements. Jenna was different. She was softer around the edges, more social, always with a new story or crisis. My mother called her lighthearted. I called her lucky. By the time I turned 35, I'd closed the biggest deal of my career, a waterfront property just outside San Diego, and with that commission, I bought a penthouse in the city. Not to show off, not to impress anyone. It was just mine. We hadn't been close, my family and I, not for a long time. Holidays felt like obligations. Birthday cards were more for show than sentiment. But when Jenna announced she was getting married, I RSVP'd anyway. The wedding was held at an estate up near Napa White Roses, everywhere soft music drifting across the lawn. Gold-accented table settings so perfect they looked like they'd been lifted from a magazine spread. I arrived alone as always, wearing a navy dress and low heels. Nothing flashy. I never liked being the center of attention. My mother found me minutes after I stepped into the reception area. "Rachel," she said, brushing my cheek with a kiss, "you made it." I told her I had RSVP'd months ago, but she just smiled and said, "Well, you know how busy you are." Translation: You never show up when we ask. From that first conversation, something felt off, like they were waiting for something. Like I had walked into a room where my name had just been spoken, and I was right. By the time Jenna walked over, all eyes were on us. Her new husband lingered behind, smiling nervously, like he wasn't sure where to stand. And just like that, in between bites of shrimp cocktail and polite laughter, the conversation shifted from small talk to suggestion to expectation. My mother folded her hands across her lap and smiled like she was about to give a speech. "Rachel," she said, we were thinking, "Jenna and Adam could really use a fresh start. Something stable, something big enough to grow into." I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because I already knew where it was headed. "Your penthouse," she said, lowering her voice, "would be the perfect wedding gift." And that's when the evening really began. My mother didn't wait for dessert. We hadn't even finished our drinks when she leaned in, folded her hands, and said it like she was reading from a script. "We think Jenna and Adam would really thrive in a place like yours. It's spacious, centrally located, and it's just sitting there." She paused, then added, "It would mean everything to them." I kept my eyes on my glass and let the silence stretch. She wasn't asking. Not really. She already had a vision in her head how I'd smile, nod, and hand over the deed like it was a party favor. Like the 10 years I spent earning it meant nothing if it could be turned into a gesture that made her look generous. Jenna was standing beside her now, one hand resting lightly on the back of my chair. She gave me that tight-lipped smile she used when she wanted something. "You've always been the practical one, Rach. You're not even home that much." Her tone was soft, like we were sisters planning a surprise. I looked up at her. I live there. You know what I mean, she said quickly. It's a lot of space for one person. And Adam and I, well, we've been dreaming about starting a family. My mother jumped back in. We thought it would be the perfect gift, a fresh start for them. They've been struggling with that tiny apartment for years. She said it like I didn't already know, like I hadn't helped Jenna with her rent in college, like I hadn't co-signed her first car loan, like I hadn't dropped everything the night she called me in tears after a breakup just to sit on the couch and listen. And now here they were, in matching pastels framed by white roses and linen napkins, asking me to give up the one place in the world that belonged entirely to me. I took a sip of champagne and set the glass down. No, I said. It's not available. My mother's eyes narrowed. It's not like we're asking you to sell it. You'd still be keeping it in the family. I shook my head. That's not what this is. You're asking me to hand over the deed. Jenna leaned closer. You don't even like big spaces. You've always said that. I smiled faintly. It's just under 900 square feet. But you live alone, she said, as if that were the final argument. That was when I understood. This wasn't about the apartment. It was about me. About being the one who never got married, the one who didn't have kids, the one who had a career they didn't understand, and a life they didn't think counted. I looked back and forth between them. My mother's hands were still folded, but her nails tapped lightly against the tablecloth. Jenna stood tall, waiting, both of them certain I'd come around. I worked for that place, I said quietly. Every inch of it. I didn't inherit it. I didn't marry into it. I earned it. We're not saying you didn't, my mother replied. We're saying it would mean a lot if you chose to share it. And what if I don't? Her smile dropped. Then you'll have made things very uncomfortable for the rest of the evening. I exhaled and stood up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't push my chair too hard or storm off. I just stood, brushed the creases out of my dress, and looked at them both. You're not entitled to the parts of my life that make you feel better about yours. Jenna's face went tight. You always have to make things so dramatic. I'm being clear, I said. And that's when it happened. My mother's hand moved faster than I expected. A quick snap through the air, the sharp crack of skin against skin. My head turned slightly more from the shock than the impact. And just like that, the reception stopped. I didn't touch my cheek. I didn't say a word. I turned back slowly and looked her in the eyes. She stepped forward. You've always thought you were better than us. I didn't respond. Not yet. I could hear the murmur start to spread behind me, silverware pausing midair, glasses half raised, guests turning in their chairs. I saw movement near the back of the garden, a woman in a black dress, tall, watching. I knew her name before I saw her face, Nora Green. I'd helped her years ago during a long, ugly legal fight over her late aunt's house. It hadn't cost her a dime. She hadn't taken her eyes off me. I turned back to my mother. That was a mistake. You've embarrassed this entire family, she said through clenched teeth. No, I said. You did that when you asked me to pay for your love. I reached for my phone. I wasn't even sure what I was going to type, but my fingers moved on their own. A quiet message. One I knew would reach the people who mattered. When I looked up again, Nora gave me the smallest nod. Just once. And I knew I wasn't alone. The moment hung in the air like smoke. Conversations stayed hushed. A few phones were already out, held low under tables. A waiter dropped something near the fountain and didn't bend down to pick it up. Even the quartet had stopped playing. My mother's voice broke through. Put that phone away. But I had already pressed send. A soft vibration followed, then another, then more. My name would be on people's screens before the cake was even sliced. I looked back at her one last time. You should sit down. And then I walked away. The garden had gone quiet. Not silent like a ceremony, but quiet in that brittle, heavy way when people don't know whether to speak or look away. I stood at the edge of the reception space, fingers still wrapped around my phone, face still warm from the slap. Nobody came up to me. Nobody offered a napkin or pulled me aside. But I could feel the air shifting, like the room had cracked open, and now everyone was waiting to see which way the dust would fall. Jenna stayed near the head table, her eyes bouncing between me and my mother. Adam stood beside her, hands folded in front of him, not saying a word. A few guests started whispering low and fast. Some were already holding their phones a little too high, pretending to text. Others had stopped pretending. My phone buzzed again, then again. Messages were coming in from numbers I recognized, colleagues, contacts, even a journalist I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Screenshots, video clips. Someone had caught it, of course. The sound, the shock, the stillness afterward. It was already spreading. Across the garden, Nora Green hadn't moved. She stood just beyond the rows of chairs, heels planted in the grass, eyes steady. I hadn't spoken to her in almost 2 years, but she hadn't forgotten. She had been there for the whole thing, from the moment I arrived, through the champagne, through the ask, through the slap. When I saw her step forward, I didn't know what she would do. But something in the set of her shoulders told me I wasn't the only one who'd had enough. Before she even opened her mouth, my mother spoke again. "You're being dramatic," she hissed under her breath, her voice sharper now. "Put the phone down before you make this worse." I didn't reply. Nora's voice broke through like a stone dropped in water. Calm, even. "Linda." My mother turned startled. "Yes," she said, half expecting a stranger, half recognizing her face. "I saw everything Nora said." The words weren't loud, but they stopped the whispering again. A few chairs creaked as people shifted. The string quartet hadn't started playing again. The whole garden felt like it was holding a breath. My mother squared her shoulders. "Who exactly are you?" Nora reached into her small black bag and pulled out a slim case. She flipped it open and held it out just long enough for the gold seal to catch the light. "Nora Green, Federal Prosecutor, Southern District." The air changed again. Even my mother took a half step back. Jenna froze. Adam blinked fast like he was trying to figure out how much of this was going to follow them home. "I know what I saw," Nora continued. "I saw you strike your daughter. I heard your tone. I watched your face. You don't understand the context," my mother said, the words tumbling now. "I don't need context to recognize abuse when I see it," Nora replied. "It wasn't a slip. It wasn't frustration. It was deliberate." I stood a few steps away, still quiet, still steady. I hadn't moved closer. I didn't need to. Nora turned slightly and addressed the guests now. "Some of you know me, some of you don't. But what happened here today, what many of you witnessed, was not just a family disagreement. It was public violence, and it was recorded." There were murmurs again, nervous laughter from a few corners. A woman near the bar set her glass down without drinking. A man in a gray suit tapped the screen of his phone and slipped it into his jacket pocket. "I'm not here to make a scene," Nora said, "but I came to this wedding as a guest." And I stood silently through the ceremony, through the toasts, through the small talk. But I won't stand silently through this. My mother opened her mouth, but Nora didn't wait. She didn't deserve that slap. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cause a scene. She said no. She looked right at Jenna next. "And to you, the new bride, starting a marriage by taking what isn't yours doesn't build a home. It sets a pattern. And it has consequences." Jenna's hands were tight around her bouquet now. Her lips parted like she was about to respond, but nothing came out. Nora turned back toward the rest of the crowd. This wasn't about a piece of property. This was about control. I've seen this before. in courtrooms, in witness statements, in the ways people learn to apologize just to keep the peace. I heard the first round of clapping then, not loud, just a few hands slow and sure, from the back row. Then another table joined, then a few more. It wasn't applause like you hear at a toast. It was heavier than that, and still I hadn't said a word. My mother was frozen now, her expression unreadable. The woman who always knew what to say suddenly didn't have the right words. I watched a few guests stand and gather their things. Quiet exits, murmured excuses. A couple near the dessert table left their plates behind. Even the violinist had packed up his instrument case and was whispering to the cellist. The wedding, if you could still call it that, was unraveling in real time. I looked down at my phone again. Dozens of new notifications. My name was trending in places I never expected. A message from a contact at a local real estate magazine. Another from someone I hadn't seen since law school. Someone had already titled it, "The Slap in the Garden." But I wasn't thinking about headlines. I slipped the phone into my bag and stood still, the weight of the moment settling. Not triumphant, just still. In that silence, I knew something had shifted for good. I stayed near the edge of the lawn as guests slowly filtered out, some pretending to check their watches, others murmuring vague apologies to no one in particular. The breeze moved through the roses light enough to make the petals sway, but not strong enough to carry the tension away. I didn't follow anyone. I didn't retreat or explain. I just stood there, hands at my sides, watching the world shift in front of me. Jenna stayed planted next to Adam, her hand still clutched around his arm. Her bouquet had wilted at the edges, but she hadn't noticed. Across the garden, my mother moved behind the archway phone, pressed to her ear, voice lowered. I couldn't hear the words, but I could guess the tone. Something between control and cleanup. I felt the weight of my dress, the warmth still lingering on my cheek, the steady buzz of my phone in my clutch. Notifications kept coming in faster now, but I didn't look. I wasn't hiding, and I wasn't running. I was simply still. And in that stillness, I felt something settle inside me, quiet but final. Nora hadn't left. She stood nearby, arms crossed, loosely, heels firm in the grass. She hadn't said anything since her speech hadn't needed to. She gave a small nod when our eyes met. Nothing dramatic, just enough. A woman I didn't recognize approached slowly, maybe early 30s, tidy blazer press badge clipped to her blouse. "Ms. Whitman," she said, voice soft, "I'm with West Coast Legal Affairs. We've followed your arbitration cases for a while. Would you be open to a statement?" I looked at her and blinked, not because I was surprised, but because the shift had happened so quickly. Just hours ago, I had walked in as the older sister in Navy barely noticed. Now reporters were asking for comments. I didn't answer right away. She offered a small smile. "No pressure," she added, "but people are already talking." "I'm not giving interviews," I said. "Not today." She nodded, handed me her card, and stepped back into the crowd. Somewhere near the drinks table, I saw Adam speaking with an older man, likely someone from work. His gestures were frantic, brows knit tight. Jenna stood nearby, her posture stiff, like she was bracing for a second wave. Neither of them looked toward me. I didn't need them to. I spotted Clara across the garden, an attorney I'd worked with years ago. We hadn't spoken much since. She gave me a slow nod from her seat. Then her phone lit up, and I saw her thumb move across the screen. A second later, mine buzzed again. "You don't owe them anything. I stand with you." I tucked the message away in my pocket and exhaled. The sky had cleared above us, and the sun was warming everything it touched, glasses, petals, shoulders. But I wasn't ready to leave just yet. I wanted to walk the full length of this moment, let it play out. My mother appeared again, stepping forward with a forced calm. Her phone was still in hand. Her tone was clipped. "This was taken out of context," she said to someone near the fountain. She misunderstood. It was just a slap. Just a slap. Those 3 words landed louder than anything else she'd said. Not because she shouted them, but because people heard and remembered. I saw heads turn. A few more guests gathered their things. One of the caterers paused mid-stride and looked toward me. Another buzz, this time from Claire, my assistant. TMZ just picked it up. Headline: Mother of Bride slaps high-powered realtor over penthouse dispute. 6 new client inquiries since 10 a.m. Want me to draft a brief statement? I stared down at the text thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then I replied, grateful for the support. No comment yet. Focus remains on serving clients with integrity. The phone slid back into my clutch. I straightened my shoulders and took a few quiet steps toward the valet path. No dramatic exit, no last word. Just the soft sound of my heels moving across the stones as the reception behind me came undone. The valet didn't ask what had happened. He handed me the keys without comment. Everyone already knew. By the time I pulled into the underground garage of my building, the clip had started circulating in bigger circles. Penthouse gate, the slap heard, in the garden. A short video of Nora's speech was already being shared by women's groups and legal forums. But I wasn't thinking about the internet. I walked into my penthouse, the space quiet, untouched, full of light. Floor-to-ceiling windows cast long gold streaks across the hardwood. The room looked exactly the same as I'd left it that morning, but it didn't feel the same. I placed my clutch on the kitchen counter, kicked off my shoes, and poured a glass of water. Then I walked through the hall, pausing at the 3rd bedroom, what my mother once called excess. I opened the door and stepped inside. It was a guest room, now clean and spare, with a soft chair near the window and a folded quilt at the foot of the bed. I stood in the doorway for a long time, thought of Nora, of Clara, of the quiet nods from across the lawn, thought of the people who'd stepped up without needing to be asked. And just like that, I knew. I wasn't part of their pattern anymore. I didn't owe anyone an explanation for the space I took up. I closed the door gently behind me and returned to the living room. Outside, the skyline glowed like nothing had changed. But inside, something had. I woke up the next morning just after 6. The light was starting to move across the bay, slow and gold, casting long shadows on the hardwood floor. My penthouse was quiet. No calls, no footsteps, no voices down the hall. Just the hum of the city waking up below me. I patted across the tile and turned on the kettle. The tea cabinet was still perfectly stocked green on the top row, chamomile and peppermint on the bottom. Everything exactly where I'd left it. I moved slower than usual, not because I was tired, but because I didn't want to rush whatever this morning was going to become. My phone buzzed twice on the counter. First was a message from Clara. Yesterday wasn't just brave, it was clean. If you want help making a record of it, legal or public, I'll be here. The second was from a reporter I didn't recognize. We'd like to request your version. The video is everywhere now. I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I carried my tea to the window and stood still, watching a delivery truck pull up 2 blocks down. A man in a reflective vest unloaded 3 crates of flowers, glanced at his clipboard, and moved on. I could have stayed in that silence all day, but I didn't. By mid-morning, I had sent 2 emails. The first went to my assistant, Claire, letting her know I'd be working from home for the rest of the week and would personally handle all press inquiries related to the incident. The second went to Nora. It wasn't long or emotional. I thanked her for standing up and told her I hadn't forgotten the case we worked on together. I hit send, closed the laptop, and opened the drawer where I kept my backup phone, the one I used for my side consulting work, separate from my main number. I hadn't touched it in months, but that morning I powered it on and opened a folder labeled Circle. It wasn't a mailing list. It wasn't even a group thread. It was a private directory I'd built quietly over the years. Attorneys, journalists, real estate analysts, city officials, people I'd worked with, helped, or gone to bat for without fanfare. Some had helped me in return. Others just kept in touch. I didn't send anything public. I didn't blast out a statement or make a video. I typed one short message to each person who needed to hear it. If you've seen the footage, you know what happened. I'm not backing away from it. I'm documenting everything. Thanks for keeping this clean. Each message was deliberate, not about revenge, just record keeping, just clarity. By noon, 4 of them had already replied. One offered pro bono media counsel. Another forwarded a request from a podcast that had covered real estate ethics. A third offered to submit a quiet piece to a women's business magazine under my name, if I wanted it anonymous if not. I told Claire to decline all interviews for now, but I gave her permission to confirm that the woman in the footage was me, that yes, I'd been struck by my mother, that yes, it had happened over property, that no, I wouldn't be commenting because I had work to do. I returned to my desk and pulled up my schedule for the next week. Most of it was client-based. 1 arbitration prep, 2 site visits, a negotiation meeting with a luxury condo developer in Santa Barbara. I left everything in place, let the emails pile up, but didn't cancel a single thing. That evening, I took a walk along the Embarcadero. I didn't wear sunglasses or a hat. I didn't duck away from crowds. I didn't check my phone. I walked like I had before. All those years I'd spent in the city, going block by block, learning how each building was zoned and which offices kept their windows open at night. Somewhere around Market Street, I stopped for coffee. A woman behind the counter glanced up at me twice, but didn't say anything. As I left, I heard a soft voice behind me say, "Good for you." I didn't turn around. I just kept walking. The video hadn't gone away. I knew that. A slow scan through my inbox showed it had been clipped, subtitled, "Reshared." But the focus wasn't just the slap. It was everything around it, the way I didn't react, the way Nora stepped forward, the way I stood still. The following morning, Claire forwarded a message from an estate law firm in Portland. They were offering a speaking opportunity at a conference, Family Assets and the Burden of Expectation. The irony didn't escape me. I sent a polite decline, then sat down at the kitchen table and drafted something new. It was just a letter. Not for publication, not even for legal use. Just a plain 1-page document titled Statement of Intent. It outlined that I was the sole owner of the penthouse, that I had purchased it with personal funds after a verified series of independent contracts, that the property had never been co-signed, gifted, or shared, that I had no plans to relinquish it. Then I added one more sentence at the bottom. Any future attempts to extract, claim, or leverage this property for personal benefit, familial or otherwise, will be treated as legal interference. I printed 3 copies, one for my records, one for my lawyer, one just to hold in my hand for a while. I wasn't mailing it. I wasn't serving it. I was just preparing, just in case. That afternoon, a courier arrived with a small box. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Inside was a note from Nora, handwritten on thick white paper. They only win when you stay quiet. You didn't. Neither did I. Beneath it was a slim metal bookmark engraved with the word boundaries. I slipped it between the pages of the notebook I kept for arbitration notes and closed the cover. Everything that needed to begin had already begun. 3 days after the wedding, I opened my laptop just after breakfast and found my name in a headline on the front page of a major real estate blog. It wasn't tabloid style. It was clean professional. A feature about power property and what it means when personal boundaries are broken in public. There was no need for me to comment. They had pieced it all together. Video stills verified timelines, my background in arbitration law, and Nora's statement. There was a quote from a guest who chose to remain anonymous. It wasn't loud, it wasn't messy. She said no, and they didn't like that. The photo accompanying the article wasn't from the moment itself. It was taken sometime during the reception. Just me standing near the garden path, hands folded, eyes forward. By mid-morning, 3 more outlets had picked it up. One of them linked to a short interview with Nora. She kept it simple. No dramatic retellings. Just a clear explanation of what she witnessed and why she felt compelled to step forward. This wasn't about one family. It's something we see all the time in different forms. A person draws a line and they're punished for it. Claire called just after lunch to go over scheduling. We've had 10 new inquiries since yesterday, she said. 3 of them mentioned the article by name. I told her to set up preliminary calls with all 10, but to hold off on press. They'll probably keep reaching out, she added. Do you want to draft a formal response? No, I said. Not yet. I spent the rest of the afternoon reviewing contracts, drafting edits, making notes for a zoning case that had nothing to do with family dynamics or wedding receptions. It felt steady, clean, the way work always had. That evening, I heard from a client I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Older man, retired teacher, I'd helped him navigate a tenant rights case when his building changed ownership. His message was short. I saw what happened. Just wanted to say you helped me once. I've never forgotten that. The next morning, I opened a letter that had been slipped under my office door. It wasn't from press or from Nora or from anyone in the circle. It was from Jenna, written in blue pen on stationery from a boutique hotel in Monterey. Rachel, I didn't know she was going to hit you. I didn't plan any of that. I thought you'd say yes, or at least hear us out. I know how it looked. I'm sorry it happened like that. Can we talk? I read it once. Then again. I didn't respond. Later that afternoon, I received an email from Adam. Short, cautious. We'd appreciate it if you didn't mention our names if you speak to media. No signature. Just that single request. That evening, a friend forwarded me a podcast clip, an ethics roundtable featuring 2 lawyers, a psychologist, and a nonprofit director. The episode was titled Inheritance Control and the Cost of Silence. They didn't use my name, but they quoted Nora, played the audio from the wedding, discussed the dynamic of family obligation tied to financial achievement. I let it play through once, then closed the app and made dinner. The calls kept coming. So did the messages, some professional, some personal, some I didn't know how to categorize. I wasn't answering all of them, just enough to keep the facts clear and the tone measured. On Friday, Nora texted, "Just checking in. Hope your week's been solid. You holding up," I wrote back later that night. "Better than I expected." The stillness is strange but good. Her reply came a few minutes later. Stillness is where power resets. That weekend, I walked to the co-op on 3rd Street, picked up a few groceries, and ran into a former client I hadn't seen since the start of the pandemic. We made polite conversation near the fresh herbs. She didn't bring up the wedding or the video, but just before we parted ways, she touched my arm gently and said, "What you did, people are noticing, in a good way." The following Monday, Claire forwarded a formal request from the City Women's Bar Association. They wanted to honor me with an award at their next conference for professional integrity and personal courage. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying, "I appreciate the offer. I'd like to think about it for a few days." The reply came within the hour. "Take your time. We'll be here." By the end of that week, the media attention had started to fade. The headlines moved on. The story dropped from the front page. But the effect didn't. I was still receiving quiet messages from women across the country. Lawyers, planners, mothers, daughters. Most of them said the same thing in different ways. "I've been there. I didn't speak up. Thank you for doing it. I didn't reply to every one, but I read them all, and I understood exactly what they meant. 2 weeks passed before I heard anything new from my mother. It came in the form of a voicemail, short-clipped and clearly rehearsed. She didn't apologize. She didn't mention the slap. Just said she hoped we could speak privately away from outside influences. She didn't say Nora's name, but I knew that's who she meant. I didn't call back. Jenna tried again the next day. This time it was a long message, 6 paragraphs in a single email. She opened by saying she had no idea things would spiral like they did. She wrote about pressure family expectations. She said Adam had been pulled into HR at work after the video surfaced, that his company was cautious about reputational risk and media noise. She said their honeymoon had been postponed not because they couldn't afford it, but because everything felt different now. I sat with that email for a while. I didn't respond. The ripple effect was reaching them, quietly but completely. Vendors had pulled out of the wedding photo package. The boutique hotel that had hosted the bridal brunch posted a message distancing itself from the event. A local business columnist ran a piece about the cost of public entitlement and used the wedding as an unnamed example. It was clear enough who they meant. One afternoon, Clara forwarded me a legal bulletin from a professional conduct group. There was a new entry about the ethics of familial coercion in estate negotiations. No names, just a reference to recent events that had prompted overdue conversation. Meanwhile, my work continued, steady, unaffected, if anything more focused. Clients didn't bring up the story, though a few sent quiet notes of support. One even dropped off a basket of teas with a handwritten card that said, "For the woman who stood tall." It wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. Then one Thursday morning, Claire brought in a padded envelope addressed to my office. No return label. Inside was a handwritten letter in my mother's handwriting. Neat, deliberate. "Rachel, I've been advised not to write this, but I am writing anyway. I see now that I handled the situation poorly. That day, that setting, I lost control of what I thought I could manage. You've made yourself very clear, and others have made things clearer. I will not ask for the penthouse again. I will not interfere with your name or your work. I wish you peace. Linda." There was no mention of the slap, no ownership of what she'd said in front of Nora or the guests. But it was the closest she'd come to a boundary she wasn't planning to cross again. I tucked the letter into a file drawer with my legal correspondence. Not to save it sentimentally, just to have it on record. That weekend I was invited to speak quietly at a private networking dinner. It wasn't a public event, just 20 or so women in law and finance. No cameras, no posts. We talked about equity ownership, family expectations, and personal cost. I didn't bring up the wedding. I didn't need to. But when I finished sharing what I had learned over the years about setting limits and negotiations, a woman near the end of the table said, "It's harder with people who knew you before you had power." The room went quiet for a second. Everyone nodded. The following Tuesday, Jenna sent one more text. "You were right. We overstepped. I let it happen. I hope you're okay. I understand if you never want to hear from me again." I didn't block her. I didn't delete the message. I just let it sit. That night, I made dinner for myself and sat by the window as the lights from the marina flickered on. My calendar was full for the next 2 weeks, client meetings, a presentation for a zoning board, a possible panel appearance in San Diego. Everything I'd worked for was right where I left it, still standing, still mine. There was no vindication, no triumph, just space and the knowledge that the line had held. The next time I stood at the window of my penthouse, the city looked unchanged. Cars moving slowly along the marina ferry lights, blinking across the bay, a few sailboats drifting without urgency. But everything felt different. The silence inside my home wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean, clear, I wasn't waiting for an apology. I wasn't rehearsing a response. I wasn't carrying the weight of a role I no longer agreed to play. The air smelled faintly of bergamot from the cup of tea resting on the sill. I had just finished rearranging the guest room again. Nothing major, just moved the reading chair closer to the window and changed out the framed photo on the bookshelf. I didn't know who would visit next or when. But when they did, they'd find a place that felt safe, steady, free of noise. I'd kept Nora's note tucked inside the back cover of my notebook. It wasn't for display, just something I read once in a while when the memory of that day tried to twist itself into something smaller. Her words reminded me that telling the truth out loud in full view wasn't a failure of composure. It was a form of respect for myself and for every woman who had been told to smooth things over in the name of harmony. I never released a public statement. I didn't need to. The silence had spoken louder than a headline ever could. Over time, the calls slowed. The articles were archived. The video stopped circulating. But the change held. People saw me differently now. Not more important, not more polished, just more fully. Jenna hasn't written again. My mother hasn't tried to call. And I haven't gone looking for either of them. Some days when I pass the third bedroom on my way to the kitchen, I pause for a moment at the door, not because I miss what was lost, but because I'm grateful for what never had to be explained again. I kept what was mine not out of spite, but because some things are built from more than concrete and square footage. They're built from years, from choices, from standing alone when no one claps or nods or understands. There's peace in knowing that nothing was taken from me. Not that day, not afterward, and certainly not now. And maybe that's the part I carry with me the most. Not the noise or the spotlight, but the quiet that came after. The stillness of standing your ground and not moving, not even when the world expects you to. If you've ever had to walk away to protect something you earned, I hope you know that was enough. You were enough. And if this story stayed with you, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Leave a comment or just share it with someone who needs it. Thanks for being here with me. I'll see you next time.